The silence in the oak-paneled dining room was not a sign of peace. It was a pressurized vacuum, maintained by my father's absolute authority and the gleaming surfaces of their wealth. The crystal decanter cast icy rainbows onto the starched white linen, illuminating the stark hierarchy of the Vance family. "Another glass of the '09 Bordeaux, Marcus? You've certainly earned it." My father, Arthur Vance, 62, a corporate lawyer whose suits cost more than my annual rent, raised his glass to my brother. Marcus, 35, the golden heir, smiled, a perfect, practiced expression of humility and success. He had just been made senior partner at his mergers and acquisitions firm. This dinner was his coronation. "To Marcus," Dad declared, his voice rich with paternal pride. A man who understood the value of a tangible asset and chose a career with real utility. 23 pairs of eyes, uncles, aunts, cousins, all minor partners in the Vance financial ecosystem, lifted their glasses to Marcus. None of those eyes lingered on me. I was Alara, 32, and my presence was the required punctuation mark, the black sheep, the cautionary tale, the inconvenient failure. My chosen path was the genesis of the background conflict that had defined my adult life. 10 years ago, I had rejected the full scholarship to Columbia Law School, choosing instead the raw, unpredictable path of the Rhode Island School of Design, RISD. The day I informed my father, he had delivered the hook that still echoed in my mind. Art is a hobby for the independently wealthy Alara. You chose poverty. When you starve, you will do it alone. And he kept that promise. He cut me off, financially, professionally, emotionally. I hadn't starved, but I had clawed my way through rent, supplies, and debt, working 3 adjacent jobs to fund my true passion, painting. The current event trigger of this Christmas Eve dinner was Marcus's success, but its true purpose was my public, annual humiliation scene. My mother, Eleanor, a woman whose social standing was inextricably linked to Arthur's financial dominance, finally addressed me, her smile a brittle apology. "Alara, dear, are you still working in that rather dusty capacity, with the old paintings?" My actual job was highly specialized and meticulous. I was a master art restorer, working independently on delicate Renaissance pieces for private collectors and museums. It required an intense combination of chemical science, historical knowledge, and aesthetic skill, a true profession. But I knew how to translate it for their comprehension. I run a private studio, Mom. I restore historical works and teach advanced color theory workshops. It pays the bills. The bills. My Aunt Lydia, a corporate lawyer, chimed in, adjusting her diamond cuff. "Such small ambition, Alara. My intern just bought her first condo. When will you buy something more permanent than your little rented warehouse space?" "My studio is large and functional, Aunt Lydia," I stated calmly, trying to maintain the composure I had spent a decade cultivating. "Functional," Arthur scoffed, placing his knife down with unnecessary emphasis. "See, Marcus? That's the difference. You talk about acquisition and equity. Alara talks about functionality and bills. She prioritizes the ephemeral, the feeling, over the measurable return. She still doesn't grasp that the value of her time is dictated by what someone is willing to pay for it, not by the emotional output of her childish pursuits." Marcus, the golden brother, leaned in conspiratorially. "Honestly, Dad, it's just a different market." "She's happy. Right, Alara? As long as you can afford that small apartment in the city, the struggle is worth the artistic soul." They all laughed, a chorus of pity and dismissal. The message was clear. My life was small, my work was decorative, and my worth was zero in the currency they recognized. What they didn't know was the proof of worth was already in motion. For the past 6 years, the core of my existence had been channeled into a single, massive canvas, hidden in the back of my warehouse studio. It was a painting born of every cut, every slight, every moment of isolation they had inflicted. I called it the Severance. It was a complex, hyper-realistic depiction of a solitary figure standing against a vast, empty mahogany room, severed from her own shadow, which lay broken like shattered glass on the floor. It was a metaphor for the Vance family table, rendered in a style that blended Dutch master techniques with modern socio-emotional realism. It was simply the best work of my life. And 3 weeks ago, my longtime trusted gallerist, Mrs. Petrova, had secured it a spot in the private winter auction held by Christie's International. Just as Aunt Lydia was launching into a detailed description of her latest ski trip, my phone, which I had strategically placed beneath the table, vibrated with a single coded text from Mrs. Petrova. The text contained only 2 numbers, won $200,000, and a single word, sold. I felt a dizzying surge of triumph, so potent it threatened to shatter my carefully constructed calm. I took a slow sip of water, allowing the number, 1.2 million, to sink in, converting years of pain into hard, undeniable financial currency. Arthur was still holding court, pontificating on the recent fluctuations in Marcus's acquisition portfolio. It's about scale, Alara. Scale. That's a word you need to learn. Marcus operates at a scale that affects entire industries. You operate at the scale of a single canvas. I placed my glass back on the table, the clink sharp and distinct. Actually, Dad, I interjected, forcing every eye to turn to me. I believe I just learned a new word for scale. Arthur looked annoyed by the interruption, but my uncharacteristic assertiveness silenced him. And what word is that, Alara? Ambition? No, I replied, standing slowly, deliberately meeting his gaze. The word is million. The revelation began not with a shout, but a financial statement. I apologize, Dad, I continued, reaching into my small clutch and pulling out a pristine white document, a certified pre-sale confirmation from Christie's. I've been quite busy this month. The large-scale project I've been working on, the Severance, just sold at the private winter auction. I placed the document on the table in front of him. The final sale price, less commission, is just over $1.2 million. The effect was instantaneous and absolute. A collective audible gasp swept through the room. The only sound louder was the sudden, sharp, high-pitched ringing in my ears. Arthur snatched the document. His face, usually so controlled, went through a horrifying series of contortions. Disbelief, then immediate professional suspicion. He scanned the Christie's letterhead, recognized the signature of a senior international art liaison, and saw the figure in bold. This is impossible, he whispered, the authority draining from his voice. A single painting? Who? Who paid this for a piece of ephemeral work? Marcus, the golden heir, leaned over his father's shoulder, his eyes wide with a raw, undeniable envy that cut deeper than any of his mockery. Christie's International, Dad. This is real. This is major. My mother, Eleanor, clutched at her pearls, the performance completely gone. Alara, where did you get this money? Is this a mistake? Did you forge this? No forgery, Mom. Just a culmination of 10 years of hard work that you called a hobby, I said, my voice gaining strength with every beat of their astonishment. The painting is a commentary on conditional legacy and emotional severance. I designed it to be a piece that resonates with those who understand the true cost of transactional relationships. Clearly, a major collector found value in that narrative. Arthur slammed the document onto the table. You knew tonight was about Marcus. You waited for this moment to attack us. This is not success, Alara. This is vindictiveness. You cut me off for choosing art, Dad, I reminded him, my voice cold and steady. You defined my worth by my financial scale. I simply presented you with a measurable return on my time. Is a 1.2 million check still poverty, Arthur? Is it still ephemeral? The turning of tables was complete. Every eye in the room, the uncles, the aunts, the partners, was no longer looking at Marcus, the successful corporate lawyer. They were staring at me, the starving artist, who had just casually dropped a 7-figure number onto the dinner table. Their admiration was not for my talent, but for the tangible power of the check. I didn't wait for Arthur's reply. I pulled my coat from the chair, preparing for my exit. Before I leave, I stated, addressing the silent room, I need to share one final crucial detail about this sale. The atmosphere in the room solidified into thick, unbreathable suspense. Arthur was breathing heavily, his chest rising and falling rapidly under his tailored suit. He knew I held the narrative power now, and he feared what I was about to reveal. The purchaser, I continued, letting the word hang in the air, is a major international collector, and the sale was discreet. The only stipulation they had was that the artist, myself, had to personally authorize the use of the piece in a public, professional context. Marcus finally found his voice, a low hiss of corporate panic. What context, Alara? What does this have to do with us? I allowed a genuine, triumphant smile to cross my face. One that held no warmth, only sharp edges. I granted the permission this afternoon. The collector needed a striking, large-scale contemporary piece to feature prominently in the lobby of their new corporate headquarters, which they are opening in Manhattan next month. I paused, scanning the faces of my family, all of whom were major players in the Northeast corporate finance sector. The collector, I stated clearly, is Westlake Global Acquisitions. The sound Arthur made was involuntary and guttural, a choking gasp of pure professional terror. Westlake Global Acquisitions was the largest, most aggressive competitor to Marcus's firm, the very company that had spent the last 2 years actively trying to dismantle the Vance family's corporate network. Westlake? Aunt Lydia whispered, her face pale. Arthur, that's where the Holbrook deal went. They're cutting into Marcus's territory. Exactly, I confirmed, turning my full attention back to my father and brother. And for the next decade, every single client, every associate, every partner, and every competitor who walks into the Westlake Global headquarters will stand beneath a 10-foot canvas titled The Severance, a visual monument to conditional relationships and emotional severance, a piece created by the artist you cut off for having no practical skills. Marcus slumped back in his chair, his earlier victory dissolving into ashes. He hadn't just lost a client to Westlake. His sister's painting, his family's private shame, was now the centerpiece of his rival's most public asset. This is malicious, Alara, Arthur croaked, grabbing the edge of the table for support. You engineered this. You deliberately sold it to hurt us. I engineered the painting, Dad. Westlake engineered the purchase, I corrected him. They paid a premium for a powerful piece of art that perfectly captures the current landscape of cold, calculating finance. If they recognized the narrative value in my work, maybe you should have recognized the value in my judgment 10 years ago. My final act was simple. I reached into my coat pocket, pulled out a spare key, and placed it next to the discarded Christie's document. This is the key to my warehouse studio, I informed them. I close the sale and officially vacate the space next week. Since I've met your standard of financial success, I no longer need to explain my life to you. I simply need to live it. I turned and walked out of the opulent dining room, leaving behind the glittering crystal, the cooling food, and the wreckage of their entire family narrative. The silence that followed me was the most satisfying sound I had ever heard. The immediate fallout was swift and brutal, playing out across legal, professional, and personal fronts. Arthur's frantic calls began immediately after midnight. They weren't apologies. They were demands. You need to pull the painting. You have a moral obligation to the family. This is professional sabotage. I did not answer. I had blocked their numbers on my personal line, communicating exclusively through Mrs. Petrova's legal team for the next 48 hours. Mrs. Petrova, my gallerist, called me the next morning, laughing with triumphant glee. Alara, darling, Westlake is doubling down. They released a teaser image of the Severance to the Wall Street Journal this morning, calling it the new face of contemporary power structure analysis. Arthur Vance's firm is already facing a public relations nightmare. The legal maneuvering was the only thing Arthur understood. He dispatched Marcus to handle the mess, attempting to legally block the painting's public display based on intellectual property claims, arguing that the narrative of the piece violated the family's confidentiality. I countered with my own legal team, who simply pointed to the standard commercial art contract signed by Christie's and my own personal trust. The painting was legally mine, and the rights to its narrative and display were entirely transferred to the collector. Marcus was forced to retreat, the costly legal attempt failing instantly. His professional humiliation intensified. He had failed to contain the damage caused by the sister he once dismissed. My mother, Eleanor, tried the emotional appeal. She sent me a long, tear-stained email, not about the painting or the money, but about family legacy. The Vances are a unit, Ilara. You are destroying your father's reputation and your brother's future out of spite. That money will be cold comfort when you realize you're alone. I replied with a single, clear paragraph. My father ensured I was alone 10 years ago. I simply used that solitude to create a work of art that proved my professional worth. If your family legacy is so fragile that a single painting can destroy it, the problem lies with the weakness of the foundation, not the strength of the art. The $1.2 million was not spent on luxury cars or unnecessary jewelry. It was immediately placed into a dedicated, high-yield investment fund. The first tangible purchase I made was the building that housed my new, private art studio and gallery in the heart of the city's arts district. I used the capital to secure my financial permanence, the exact opposite of the ephemeral existence my father predicted. The extended consequence, the price of pride. 2 years passed. 2 years of absolute, deliberate severance. I communicated with my family only through formal, seasonal cards sent by my financial assistant, signed simply E. Vance. I had successfully replaced the toxic emotional currency of my past with the solid, unassailable financial reality of my present. My art restoration studio thrived, fueled by the professional credibility the Christie's sale afforded me. Collectors who once hesitated to trust a younger, independent artist now sought me out. I used the $1.2 million as seed capital, not spending money, but leveraging it to launch a parallel business, Vance Arts and Acquisitions, VAA, a firm dedicated to representing marginalized and contemporary artists, ensuring they navigated the treacherous financial waters my family controlled. Meanwhile, the Vance financial empire was struggling. Arthur's reliance on old-world banking relationships and physical networking failed to keep pace with the digital mergers Marcus's rivals, like Westlake, were executing. The presence of my painting in Westlake's lobby became a constant psychological victory for my father's rivals, a silent monument to his own professional blindness. Marcus, burdened by the weight of the family name and Arthur's increasing micromanagement, was unable to secure the crucial, high-stakes merger that would have stabilized the firm. He called me once, pleading for advice. "Alara, I know you won't talk to Dad, but please help me. How are Westlake's teams moving so fast? They're using some kind of proprietary data model we can't crack. They know our next move before we even make it." I listened, my internal mind running the metrics. I knew exactly what Westlake was using, a bespoke predictive analytics algorithm that leveraged AI to model market shifts. It was expensive, new, and exactly the kind of digital nonsense Arthur had dismissed a decade ago. "The model you're looking for, Marcus," I explained, maintaining a calm, advisory tone, "is not something you buy. It's something you build, and you need personnel who understand its foundation, not just its outcome. Your firm sadly only hires for traditional outcomes. But we can hire anyone." "We have the capital!" he insisted. "You have the capital for last year's technology, Marcus, not tomorrow's," I countered. "The talent that builds those models doesn't want to work for a legacy firm that mocks the digital future." I provided him with a handful of strategic, professional suggestions, enough to show my competence but not enough to save his sinking ship. My goal was not destruction, but definitive independence, the climax of the professional collapse. The true professional climax arrived not in a dramatic confrontation, but in a confidential email forwarded to me by a former colleague of Marcus. Vance & Associates was facing a severe internal liquidity crisis, forcing Arthur to consider selling off a portion of the firm to the highest bidder to avoid bankruptcy. The primary bidder? Westlake Global Acquisitions. Arthur Vance was about to sell his life's work to the company that publicly humiliated him daily with my $1.2 million painting. The irony was devastating. I scheduled a meeting with Arthur, the first non-formal contact in over 2 years. He came to my new gallery, VAA, a sleek, minimalist space that perfectly represented my current success. He walked past my team of young, brilliant artists and analysts, his eyes wide with surprise and a deep, reluctant respect. He found me in my private studio, surrounded by unfinished canvases and the precise tools of my restoration trade. He didn't sit down. "I need your help, Alara," he stated, cutting through all pretense. "Westlake is buying the firm. They'll gut it, liquidate the assets, and erase the Vance name. I can't let that happen. It's my legacy." "Your legacy," I repeated, dipping my brush in turpentine, cleaning off a pale wash of gray. "The one you cut off 10 years ago for a $1.2 million painting? That legacy?" "The painting was a magnificent piece of work, Alara," he conceded, the phrase tasting like ash on his tongue. "I was wrong. I was wrong about you. I was wrong about art. I was wrong about the future. I need capital. I need a counterbid. I need to out-leverage Westlake." "You need $40 million to counter Westlake's offer and stabilize the firm, Dad. Where do you propose getting that capital?" He looked desperate. "Marcus has some assets. We can borrow. We can mortgage the house." "The house is already leveraged to the maximum, Arthur." "And Marcus's assets are tied up," I informed him, shaking my head. "There is only one person who can generate that kind of liquidity quickly enough to save your firm from Westlake." He stared at me, the understanding dawning slowly. You, your art fund, VAA. Vance Arts and Acquisitions is not an art fund, Dad. It's a privately held acquisition company specialized in high-risk, high-return investments, I clarified. And I have the liquidity. I have the capital. I can beat Westlake's offer by 10% and save your company from being gutted. Arthur swallowed, his immense pride collapsing into absolute humility. Why, Elara? Why would you save the people who spent a decade telling you your career was worthless? I put my brush down, looking at him with a gaze that held neither anger nor pity, just cold, factual assessment. Because your company, Arthur, still holds thousands of high-value legacy contracts that will benefit my firm's long-term interests. It is a necessary acquisition for my professional ecosystem, and I don't want Westlake owning the intellectual property. And the personal cost? He asked. The personal cost, I said, a slight smile touching my lips, is negligible. The price of the firm is $40 million. I placed a legal document on the easel next to an unfinished canvas. You will sign these papers. I will acquire 51% of the firm's voting stock. I will assume the role of chairman of the board, and I will mandate the immediate implementation of the digital infrastructure I advised 10 years ago. You will remain founder emeritus, with a comfortable salary, but no operational control. You will simply be a consultant on history. Arthur picked up the pen. His hand was shaking violently. He looked at the painting on the easel. Abstract, explosive, but perfectly controlled. He looked at my face, realizing that the gentle child he remembered was gone, replaced by the relentless professional he had inadvertently created. And Marcus? He asked. Marcus will remain a partner, Dad, I said. He's brilliant, but he needs to learn to take orders from the future. He will report to my newly appointed CEO. You'll find that my management team values competence over bloodline. Arthur signed the papers, the scratch of the pen against the paper sounding like the definitive severance of the old world. The long-term consequence was the quiet, total re-engineering of the Vance family legacy. I did not make a big public splash. My acquisition was announced subtly, focusing on a strategic merger between VAA and Vance & Associates to stabilize and modernize the firm. I deliberately shielded my parents from public scrutiny, allowing them to maintain a semblance of dignity. But the reality was absolute. I was the financial sovereign. My new firm, Vance Arts and Strategic Capital, VASC, became the quiet power in the corporate landscape. Marcus was forced to report to a CEO who was 5 years his junior and possessed a digital skill set he could only dream of. He learned humility, and slowly, genuinely, began to thrive under a structure that rewarded competence over bloodline. My mother, Eleanor, initially tried to leverage my success socially, but I ended that quickly. You will not use my firm's acquisition as your social currency. Mom, you will attend the required functions. You will be polite, and you will not, under any circumstances, comment on my personal life or career choices. You are observers now. Her social calendar shrank to only the events where she could maintain silence about the source of her stability. The lack of control was her constant, quiet torment. 7 years after the original Thanksgiving dinner, I hosted the annual VASC Partners meeting. It was held in the fully renovated modern VASC headquarters, formerly Vance & Associates. The boardroom was sleek, glass, and digital. My father, Arthur, now 69, approached me at the end of the meeting, his face worn but peaceful. Elara, he said, holding out a thin, hand-bound sketchbook. I've been going through some old things. I found this from when you were 7. You drew the entire Vance corporate structure, with me at the top, and all the partners beneath. But you drew a single clean line that cut the paper in half, separating your brother's side from yours. I was always drawing the Severance, Dad, I replied, taking the sketchbook. I know, I was so arrogant then. I thought my money and my law degree meant I could define reality. I thought art was a weakness, he confessed, meeting my eyes with a genuine remorse that finally felt earned. I was a fool. You are the only reason this name still exists. You saved us. And I am sorry that it took losing everything for me to see your true value. Your apology is accepted, Arthur, I said, the words feeling clean and true. But you need to understand that the salvation was not for you. It was for the structure. I saved the firm because it was a valuable, tangible asset worth $40 million. I used the money you called ephemeral to acquire the practical thing you worshipped. I simply used your metrics to prove my own worth. My final act of professional sovereignty was granting Marcus the CEO title of Vask, knowing he had finally earned it through competence, not inheritance. I stepped back, remaining the chairman of the board and the ultimate financial authority, focusing my energy on VAA, my true passion. My ultimate victory was not defined by the money, but by the quiet reality that I had established a permanent, unassailable financial structure where my life was entirely immune to the judgment of the past. The art I created, the career I chose, and the fortune I built all flowed from the decision they called my greatest failure. I had purchased their entire legacy, and in doing so I had purchased my own, definitive, uncompromised freedom.